Hello Guyana and welcome to this week's edition of The Public Interest. I'm your host, Gomiti Gangadan. Thank you for joining us. Of course, this is a weekly discussion forum which provides the opportunity to local journalists to engage the President on matters of national importance. With us this morning is the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Gomiti.
We have two journalists from the local media fraternity joining us this morning. To my extreme left is Mr. Tajeram Mohabir from the Guyana Chronicle and Mr. Gary Eleazar from the Guyana Times. Good morning and welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Sir, this morning we want to focus on the development of Guyana's foreign policy. Sir, you have been aggressively advancing Guyana's movement towards transforming into a green state. First, making this a key part of your presentation at the 71st UN General Assembly, following which you attended Conservation International's annual general meeting. This weekend, you are slated to travel to Morocco to participate in COP22. What do you believe has been the impact of your international advocacy for the sustainable management of the environment so far, and what are your goals for this meeting in Morocco?
Well, very complex question, but it's common sense for a country like Guyana. We are endowed with abundant natural resources. We are part of the Guyana Shield. And it is just not only logical, but it makes economic sense for us to make use of our natural resources. And Guyana is part of the lungs of the earth. We are part of what I would call the second Garden of Eden. We have abundant wildlife, freshwater resources. We are a net carbon sink, which means that we absorb carbon dioxide generated by the more industrialized countries. So all in all, I think that Guyana is on a good pathway. It's good for our people. It will encourage a new form of education, new form of ecotourism, a new form of economic development in terms of sustainable energy and other benefits from the green economy. It will enable us to preserve our wildlife and, of course, our rivers and water resources. So, for me, it is common sense. It makes economic sense. And I go to Morocco in a few days' time. Morocco is concerned, it is really COP, which is the Conference of Parties, and it is concerned mainly with climate change. And Guyana, by preserving such a large part of its forests, up to now we still have about 85% of our forests, of our territory covered with forests, is a key player in the world, not just locally, but in the world. And that is the purpose of my going to Morocco, and that is why I was at Conservation International, and that is what is driving my policy to make Guyana into a green state.
Thank you, sir. Journalists, you can now pose your questions on the topic, and we'll start with Tajeram.
Mr. President, do you have any specific proposal for your Morocco meeting?
Generally, we are parties to various conventions and agreements, and we will continue to commit parts of our forests, our waterways, our wetlands, to keep those parts of our country green. So there's no specific target we're aiming at. We've already made commitments for the reduction of global warming. And internally in Guyana, we're now working on our budget. We are going to move more closely to adopting green energy and to reducing the possibility of warming inside Guyana, doing away with plastics, doing away with fossil fuel energy generation, and also keeping our forests intact. So we have a policy, we have a strategy, but we don't know exactly what the other parties will say in the COP. And we are committed to working with them to bring down the rate, to reduce the rate at which global warming is taking place. So you can say, yes, we have a specific strategy, but we will work along with the other parties to make sure that climate change does not cause greater damage than it is causing at present.
Gary.
Sir, you mentioned that you're not sure on some of the other specifics from some of the other parties. I did not want to transition to this right away, but the incoming U.S. president, he has a public position on climate change, whereas he more or less does not believe it even exists. How would this affect Guyana's policy and its preparing its policy?
Well, he has just come off of the campaign trail, and I expect that he has started his being briefed by the outgoing technical and political leaders in the Obama administration. And I would reckon in the next 2 months he'll become more aware of the fact that global warming is a reality. You know, there were people, well, I don't want to go that way, but I think there is abundant evidence to show that this is not, what is taking place in the world is not normal, and that the generation of greenhouse gases, the generation of smog, the generation of industrial pollutants, the use of certain types of fossil fuels are all contributory factors to global warming. So I'm quite sure that once he's in office and he gets the benefit of the advice of the technical people in the U.S. administration, there may be some modification of his views.
Tajeram? Oh, you have a follow-up, Gary?
Follow-up.
Yes, please.
No,
I want to cover.
no, not so much a follow-up. In terms of developing our own policy, there is a criticism that we're more or less not doing this indigenously, and we're more or less looking too much towards the international community. How would you respond to this?
No, that is not correct. We have an economy which is based to a significant degree on the extractive industries, particularly bauxite, gold and diamond mining, and timber extraction. In fact, this year, bauxite celebrates its 100th year of extraction. So we have a long history of the extractive industries. And we are aware that the industries have the capability of destroying the environment. I won't go so far as to call it desertification, but when you look at some of the mined out areas, it's difficult even to generate agriculture. But it's also affected our rivers and streams, and a lot of the indigenous people in the hinterland depend on clean rivers. And it has contributed to some forms of disease, because once those areas that are mined out are left, you have stagnant pools of water, you have mosquitoes, which can bring dengue, malaria, filaria, Zika, chikungunya. So we are aware of the dangers. Very much underground. We are very much underground in that regard. And the thrust towards creating a green state is driven by local factors, by engaging with indigenous communities, by dealing with public health problems, and by looking at the need for reforestation. So we're not trying to conform to any international norms or conventions. We have a problem in Guyana, and the green state is a solution to that problem. I'm quite convinced that the green state is the way to go.
Tajeram.
Yeah, thank you, Gomati. Since we're on that issue, I'm tempted to ask a question. Excuse me, a few weeks ago, there was a report in the Guyana Chronicle, the state newspaper, where a doctor from the Georgetown Hospital, more specifically from the oncology department, said more than 50% of the cancer patients are from the hinterland regions, and there's a suspected link between cancer and the pollution of the water stream due to mining. She's calling for an investigation into that matter. Would your government investigate that situation?
We would investigate any charge, any allegation that practices in the extractive industries are contributory to the public health problems we have. I'm aware of that, but sometimes in Guyana we may not have those resources. We can seek international help, particularly from PAHO, WHO. There are other factors which contribute to the form of cancer, and I don't want to go there. Some might be behavioral, but if there is a link, if there's an allegation of a link, yes, the answer is yes, we are prepared to follow up that allegation and have an investigation.
Oh, since we're in the U.S. as well, I just asked that question because we're talking about hinterland, developments in the hinterland. Guyana is part of CARICOM, and next year you'll be the chair. Now, what a change of government in the U.S. means to CARICOM and the Caribbean in general?
Well, it means a lot, and it means a little. It means a lot because we've always, over the last 20 years, the Caribbean community has engaged President Clinton, engaged President Bush, engaged President Obama, and we are sure it's going to be, the opportunity will be taken at the CARICOM level. Certainly I will initiate this in January to engage the new administration. There is continuity because the United States has been engaged too in the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, and there are other measures such as like disaster relief, as occurred in Haiti, which is a CARICOM member, and Grenada when it had a terrible hurricane. So we hope that there's going to be no disruption. I don't anticipate any disruption, and the policymakers in Washington will have a responsibility for briefing the incoming administration and what is taking place. So I don't think there's going to be any disruption, and Guyana is not working towards any significant change. I said that already. I welcome incoming President Trump, and I wish that he would continue the policies initiated by his predecessors, particularly President Clinton and President Obama. So CARICOM's engagement with the United States is of long standing and is very beneficial to the Caribbean. For example, in the area of narco trafficking, we simply do not have the reach, the equipment, the resources to deal with some of these transnational crimes. We need partners, and America has been a good partner.
Gary.
Sir, you speak optimistically, but there are a lot of different views concerning Mr. Trump's coming onto the scene. We see Sir Hilary Beckles' warning of migration back to the Caribbean from the U.S. We've seen warnings about Mr. Trump and what he'll do with the global trade and the impact it will have there. Yes, you can be optimistic, but what can we as a Caribbean and Guyana particularly do to cushion or to prepare for any such untoward events?
I don't think it's an intelligent policy for any state to base its economic development or social policy on migration, on emigration. So I think, regardless of what Mr. Trump does in the area of Caribbean migration, it is already problematic because we've had migration problems from the Haitians and migration problems from the Cubans, and there's been a slower trickle from other countries like Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. I think that the Caribbean, should aim at looking at its resources and developing a type of economic policy which makes better use of its talented human resources. The Caribbean, per capita is a very highly talented region, and I don't think it's in the interest of any Caribbean state to encourage migration. I would like to see Guyana and also Suriname. And together, as I've said before, we have land space the size of Germany. I'd like to see the Caribbean people using their talents, using their enterprise, using their expertise to look inwards and develop these resources, like ecotourism, investment in Guyana, in manufacturing sector. So I'm not interested in encouraging migration. We have a large diaspora.
If I could rephrase a bit, not encouraging migration, preparing for that influx of persons coming back as a result of Mr. Trump in the office there.
Well, there are two sides of the coin. I think that the diaspora, I've encouraged the diaspora already to look towards Guyana as a place for investment. I wish some of them would return and help to develop the country. Some of them have accumulated capital. Some of them have improved their educational qualifications. Some of them, have been able to see a wider economic sphere in the United States. And I think the Caribbean will be a benefit, will benefit from their returning. I'm not thinking about deportees or criminals, and I think it's too soon to tell. I mean, the man's just being elected today, and that type of
he has been elected on a mandate.
Yeah. I'm a politician, you know. Politics is not it's not an exact science. And you may see, as I said before, when he receives advice from his policymakers in Washington, you may see some modification of those policies.
Is there any real concern from Mr. Granger, any real economic concerns as a result of Mr. Trump's presidency?
No, I'm not afraid that any action that he'll take could be harmful to Guyana. He's a businessman. He's known as a tycoon, as a magnate. And if he can help to stimulate business in the Caribbean or in Guyana, I'm for it. I would like to see more United States or North American investors coming to Guyana to help us in our green energy program, in our mining, in manufacturing. If that's the type of businessman he is, I would welcome that investment from the United States.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I do want to shift your focus a little. You recently returned from a state visit to Chile, and this has signaled strong relations between the two countries. There are even more potential for stronger ties between CARICOM and Latin America. How important are strong ties between these two regions for regional development?
Well, there's been much development at the edges. For example, countries like Jamaica are closer to Central America. Belize, of course, is part of Central America. So there's more frequent interaction between what we can call the Western Caribbean and the countries of Central America. But this is a great step for Guyana because it's, you can almost say it's the northernmost country going to the southernmost country. The relationship between Guyana and Chile is developing into a special feature. Chile has got a huge coast of about 6,000 kilometers, and it's basically a maritime state. It's very narrow, it's almost like a dagger. But they are concerned with maritime issues, and the Caribbean region generally is a maritime zone. Most of the member states of CARICOM are in a maritime setting. So we hope to benefit in that regard. Chile has got tremendous experience in maritime issues. Also, Chile is part of what is called the Pacific Rim of Fire. It's hard to go to Chile without experiencing some tremor. They're very frequent earthquakes. Some of them are very bad, but many of them are mild. But Chile has experience in disaster preparedness. And in this regard, you know, Caribbean has suffered terribly from disasters. We have an organization called CIDEMA, and most recently we've had problems, you know, damage to the Bahamas and to Haiti. So this is another area in which there will be cooperation. And there are other areas of expertise. As you know, Chile is one of the major mining countries on the continent. And we're looking to learn from Chile about best practices so that our own mining industry will be better regulated. So we're looking for assistance there, rather than have miners, you know, going into the hinterland and guessing where mineral. We're going to get proper mapping done so that people can go directly to areas which can bear the minerals that they're searching for. So there's going to be a wide range of cooperation between Chile and Guyana, and also between Chile and the Caribbean community. But I think it's going to be good for both of us.
Thank you, sir. Journalists, you can now pose your questions off of the topic, and we'll begin with Tajeram.
Well, I hope you permit me to ask one more question on that topic.
Free press.
Mr. President, on the campaign trail, Mr. Trump spoke about deporting illegal immigrants. Assuming he goes ahead with that policy and there are a few Guyanese who are deported, is Guyana prepared to deal with that situation?
Well, this is not a Trump policy. You know, no country tolerates illegality. And if there are abuses, it is quite within the rights of a sovereign state. to minimize the impact of those abuses on the host country. Again, we have deported illegals, and illegal Guyanese have been deported from other countries, including Trinidad and Barbados, and sometimes even Suriname. So we need to look at illegality in the context of the sovereign state and do as much as possible to discourage any form of illegality. As far as the United States is concerned, we need to work with the United States government so that persons who might have been involved in violent crimes, murders or crimes involving narco trafficking or people trafficking, are notified to us so that we can build in Guyana the resources to manage them when they come back here. We don't have the capability. As you know, there's still some degree of narcotics trafficking in Guyana. We have execution murders, and we don't want to have people coming back here who contribute to that form of criminality. So it is something that we can work out with the United States, but as far as I'm concerned, it is within the jurisdiction, is within the power of a sovereign state to expel or remove persons, illegal aliens. And we just want to be better prepared, and it's something that the Ministry of Public Security is aware of, and we will have to make sure that we put measures in place to ensure that those persons, those deportees, do not try to perpetrate crimes when they get back here. But it's something we must be prepared for.
You want to go again, Tajeram?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, on the matter of crime locally, we see the situation now where, apart from there being criminal acts almost every day, we have a situation where the Commissioner of Police returned, and he and his deputy are now at loggerheads over some decisions that he would have made. I'm wondering, what does this do for the morale of the police generally in their crime fighting, and to what extent would this situation embolden criminals further?
You put your finger on a very sore spot, which was discussed at the National Security Committee earlier this week. And the Minister of Public Security has been asked to investigate the complaints which were reported in the media. It was quite unseemly, almost, let me stop at that. It's unseemly for a matter such as that to be reported in the media. The police force is a hierarchy, and the Commissioner of Police is the head of the force. The Assistant Commissioner who's acting for him during a period of vacation obviously has to take authoritative action on some matters. He can't just sit on his hands. If problems need to be solved, he's there to solve the problems. So I wouldn't want to go further at this point in time. It has been brought to the attention of the National Security Committee. And although there's a hierarchy, although there's a structure, there's also a convention that persons who are acting have to do their work in an authoritative manner and not in a passive manner. I do not believe the problems are unsolvable, and I would like to assure you that we are concerned about it. It can have an impact on the morale of policemen and on the public if they see the major law enforcement agency being, well, not paralyzed, but at least victim of the type of high-level quarreling. It can't inspire confidence. And as you say, it may even embolden people who feel that this is an opportunity to do mischief. So I'm very confident that the Minister of Public Security has taken the matter in hand. It came up at the National Security Committee, as I said, and I think it will be resolved. Everything I've heard about the matter or read about the matter suggests that it is actually a storm in a teacup.
Tajeram.
Mr. President, early in the presidency, we had situations where crimes were committed, but these cases were were dealt with in a very confined, not confined manner, in a very prompt manner. The perpetrators were caught and they were processed through the court. Of late, we've noticed a slowdown in that. What is contributing to that slowdown?
The slowdown is, there is an apparent slowdown. I wouldn't doubt that. I'd like you to bear in mind that I've said before, we have inherited a crime situation in which over a long period of time, maybe 15 years or more, we've had an erosion of the capability and the capacity of the Guyana police force during what I call the troubles. During that period between 2000 and 2010, more or less, more policemen were killed than in any other period of the history of the Guyana police force. The police force was weakened, and we had rampant criminality. The murder rate was much higher, executions were much higher, drug lords were driving about the city of Georgetown. The police force was present in those days. Policemen who were witnesses to some of those events are still in the force. You know, we have not purged the police force. So there are still some elements in the force and in society who were involved in those troubles. Now, certain high-profile crimes that we're noticing now seem to be holdovers from that period. And I am very suspicious about the fact that the police are reacting very slowly. And of course, a robbery at the house of the former Minister of Home Affairs cannot go unnoticed. A robbery at the house of a prominent accountant cannot go, the son of a prominent accountant cannot go unnoticed. So I get the impression these crimes are they're crimes. They're almost embarrassed the police force or embarrassed the government, because I don't think people expected to take any haul of loot from the former minister's home, but it certainly made the headline news. So we have to be very careful that people are committing crimes in order because there's some ulterior motive, maybe to show that the police force is weak or the government is weak. So we don't know for sure what is taking place. But many of these crimes have their origins in the weakening of the police force during the Troubles and the desire of some persons to repeat or to continue the lawlessness of that period. So we have a very serious problem in our hands. We reckon that the action that we've taken to bring the British security sector reform team into Guyana is the correct action, because we cannot proceed in this country with an unreformed Guyana police force. And some of the actions which are taking place convince me that the Guyana police force has to be reformed, and we are going to do just that.
Gary.
Just a clarification. Are you suggesting that there's a coordinated effort behind some of these acts by some intellectual authors in order to embarrass the government?
I am suggesting that the pattern of crimes that we've seen is part of a campaign. I am suggesting that the pattern is a part of a campaign.
Tajeram, you want to go again, Gary?
Yeah.
Sure.
On October 13th last, you made a presentation to the National Assembly. Subsequently, there was a debate. I was hoping to get your response to that debate. And could you say if you believe that it demonstrates that there is an unwillingness on the part of the opposition to actually work with the government?
The opposition seemed to be concerned with defending its record. But the record is indefensible. Waiving a book which is an incomplete record of what took place is not helpful. The opposition has to answer the specific questions which which were raised in my presentation on the 13th of October, and those questions were not addressed. It's not a question of picking up a book and trying to blame the party which was in opposition at that time. They must answer and say whether the statements which I made are true or untrue. I mean, did the government of the day conduct a commission of inquiry into the death of a cabinet minister? And the answer is no. Did the government conduct an inquiry into the allegation that a certain minister had used official letterhead paper to acquire equipment to eavesdrop on other people's telephone conversation? They must answer specific questions. So even though the Bartica trial is going on now, there was no inquiry. If a plane lands in Rupuni, I inquire into it, and I will get answers. And you have, dozens of people being killed with no inquiry. So it's not a question of waving a book in Parliament. You must answer the specific questions. And we now have to pick up the pieces of that broken decade and fix the police force. That's what I'm trying to do. So I do not think that the matters that were raised were adequately addressed in Parliament. And I don't think the public should be misled about the damage which was done to the security forces and to the country as a whole during that deadly decade that I referred to.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, journalists. That has brought us to the end of this week's edition of The Public Interest. Thank you for joining us. Do have a productive week, Guyana. Goodbye.